Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, where we bring you data and science-backed answers and advice from billionaires. In this podcast episode, I'm going to be covering how to read one book a week, or even one book a day. So welcome to the podcast. My name is Will Chow, and this is Will's Personal Development Show. So this topic, I think I have a lot of experience with, and I'm quite familiar with some of the concerns and problems people have. So some people will say, I really want to read more business books and biographies and psychology books and science books and self-help, but I never get to it, or I just want to, but they just get so boring, and I end up going back to watching Netflix and surfing social media, and that ends up sucking out of my time. Others just think they read so slow and they can't get to it. So how have I been able to do this? I probably read 2 or 3 books a week, and they're not just any books, but they're very actionable, useful books. It's stuff about the science of the mind, longevity, health, focus. I just read a book on social intelligence. I read one on improving emotional intelligence. Before that, I read a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel on the history of agriculture and humans and warfare and breeding, and pretty much drew conclusions as to why certain populations and ethnicities ended up becoming much more profitable than others. Before that, I read a biography on Leonardo da Vinci, and before that, I read a book on Bruce Lee. So how have I been able to do this, and how can you? I think I can come at this from a different angle than others, because I've been there in the sense that I used to not really read much, and I thought that nonfiction was boring. I remember complaining and making fun of the nonfiction section at my middle school library and then my high school library. I remember telling some of the people I sat next to during library class or media class that we shouldn't even have a nonfiction section because history and all this stuff was super boring. So that gets me to my first tip on how you can start looking to read more, whether it's your goal is one book a day or just one book a month, or one book a year because you're not reading at all. The first tip is that you have to start looking to see how it can be fun and enjoyable for you. For me, it was a very slow process, and like many topics in life, you can have a deep interest in it, but because you've had a poor teacher who introduced you to that topic in the wrong way, it didn't stick. But if you just keep trying and testing, you may find that life gives you a teacher, and a teacher doesn't have to be another human. It could just be an experience. A teacher introduces a topic in the right way that just opens the door for you. And I've seen that happen for many things, including bachata, a dance style I've learned, as well as CrossFit, something I never thought I would get into because it was too jockey and manly for a Asian nerd like me. So for me, how did I slowly get introduced to nonfiction in the right way? Well, I didn't read for many years because I thought reading was a waste of time, and I thought I could spend it better studying and going to school and doing homework. Back then, all I would read was fiction, and then I stopped reading fiction because I thought it was a waste of time. I loved Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings, not as much. I think it was the way J.R.R. Tolkien writes is just a bit too crazy and too detailed. But I would read a lot of stuff, the Inheritance series and stuff like that. And then I just stopped for many years. And one day I was playing a lot of video games on the computer, League of Legends mainly. And then I thought I would be semi-productive by listening to lectures and speeches while I played a video game off YouTube. And I just started getting into some of these lectures that Warren Buffett and others like him were talking about, how you want to invest in yourself if you want to be rich. And some of those mindsets just really stuck with me. And I was like, yeah, like these are stuff that anyone can implement, and most people aren't because they're not aware of it and they're not putting in a little extra work every day. And then I stumbled across a few full audiobooks that people had uploaded onto YouTube. Some of them were really good. They were like books about how to be millionaires from actual millionaires, like The Millionaire Next Door. And I really liked those. And I was like, wow, I'm being so productive, but I'm also having a great time playing video games too. I'm absorbing this stuff too. It's not like they're just going in one ear and out the other. Like if you have the volume up a decent, reasonable amount, like they say things very crisply and clearly. You can't not hear it. And so I started getting more and more interested in this, and it started off slow, but over time, I just became really enthused about this. So I think one thing people are lacking is that lack of mindset. They look at it as a chore. They don't find it fun. But sometimes it just means finding the right book. There are really fun, digestible books that a beginner should get into if they're looking into getting into all this stuff. One might be Freakonomics. Another might be something by Malcolm Gladwell, like Outliers. Just getting introduced to the right book and the right concept just takes some testing and tasting and trying out different things. And, if you can adopt this, you're off to the races. Now, the second thing is giving yourself a break and celebrating even the smallest incremental gains. I didn't start off from day one, and after that Warren Buffett inspiration, epiphany, I did not just say, I'm going to set out to read 2 to 4 books a week right off the bat. No, right out of the gate, I started slow. I just did what I enjoyed, which was reading and listening to audiobooks. And I did that at a slow rate. I probably listened to 1 audiobook a month because that was what I liked doing, and I was slower at it, and I didn't always want to listen to one while playing video games. But over time, I was like, you know what? I play a lot of video games. I could probably do a bit more of this. And over time, that started to build. And I started to learn from the books I read and realized, oh my goodness, there's all these time management and productivity hacks I'm learning from the productivity books and from the self-help. And I started to realize I could turn my car into a university on wheels. I could listen to audiobooks while I'm exercising, driving, waiting in line, cooking, cleaning, doing the laundry, washing dishes, going for a walk. And so I started to optimize my day and my life and slowly start to get more into it. The third tip is think outside of the box to how you consume that medium. Your main goal is to get information from one source to another. That doesn't mean it has to be through text on a hardcover paperback book. As I've hinted at, I'm a huge learner. I'm a huge audiobook fan. People don't assume this because they look at my YouTube videos, and you can see it for yourself at youtube.com/willyouLaugh. And there'll be this giant pile of books in my background, and people just assume, man, you're reading all these books, you're summarizing them on your blog, on your YouTube channel, and on your podcast. You must be just a reader, a natural nerd who always liked reading, and reading paperback books must be your hobby. Whereas, normal people like us like to party and hook up with girls. So first off, that's unfortunately in a way it's not true. Unfortunately in a way it is true. What I mean by that is that, unfortunately, I am not like that. I kind of wish I was more like that, because when you look at the richest people in the world, they would just tear through hardcover books. In reality, while I do read hardcover books, it's only when I don't have the audiobook version of that. Therefore, I tend to listen to maybe 5 times more audiobooks than actual reading textbooks. I know Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, they just tear through real, like, straight up paperback books, like tons of them, like sometimes dozens. And I wish I was more like that. Even if it's weird or uncommon, I think it would help my earning potential. But I'm really not like that. I'm more average and normal than most people assume. So in a way, that's unfortunate. Now, how it's fortunate is that, I am average, I am normal, and that's to be celebrated too. I think it's good to kind of have normal interests and goals in life. And I do enjoy beautiful girls, and I'm not so much of a partier. I don't really enjoy alcohol that much, but anything with girls, whether they're at a party or reading a book at a library or just sitting at a pool relaxing, I mean, I'm down with that. So I really have pretty basic goals and interests too. And so in that sense, there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's a lot of benefit to just embracing how you are and being okay with the fact that you're not just some freak genius who has this natural talent to love reading books. So start slow. If your goal is just 1 book a year, celebrate that. Don't beat yourself up. If you went from 0 to 1 book a year, that's still good progress. You're trending in the right direction. And if you trend to like 1 book a month, that's tremendous progress. You've just 12x'd your reading rate. So don't gloss over those achievements, because if you celebrate them and look at them and acknowledge them, it'll keep your momentum going, and you'll stay happy, and it'll keep you trending in the right direction, and it'll help your self-esteem and self-worth. So in terms of your best medium, there's 3 main mediums for taking in information. There's text, so that means ebooks, web articles, paperback books. The second would be audio. So that could be audiobooks, podcasts, anything that's just listening. It could be you sitting at a campfire with someone talking to you. While there's like a visual component, it's not as strong. I mean, they're just waving their hands. And then the third one is visual, which would be like videos, whether it's a YouTube video or a TEDx lecture, or someone giving a speech, or someone doing an animation or infographic, or drawing something on a whiteboard. Those are all visual components. So my strongest is definitely audio. I'm more of a listener than anything else. And then comes probably visual. And then, believe it or not, this is shocking to some, but text is probably my worst. It's definitely not as strong as listening, but not too far behind visual. So I think that's quite interesting. And what that means for you is, just figure out what you want to do to, get your optimal lifestyle, or whatever your goals are in life. Maybe it's not to achieve a lifestyle, but to impact the world, or become a certain level at a craft, or make a lot of money, whatever it is. Figure out, well, what information do I need next to achieve that, and turn that into the most favored piece of content you can. So that might be audio. And don't be ashamed of it. You shouldn't be ashamed of it. Just because everyone else in your family or your classmates or your school tells you reading is the best, and yada yada. If you're still getting the same information or better information at a more efficient rate through your visual or audio methods, who cares what others think? Don't be guilty or ashamed that you're not doing it by reading actual paperback books. I'm not. And anyone who tells you you shouldn't. Now, I think it's quite common to have listening as your number one form of learning in terms of those three medium, because if you look at the history of human civilization, actual books for you to read or any type of text didn't come about until the last couple centuries. In fact, the written word was something that only for most of its existence, it was only the high guards, the government officials, those who were direct reports to the king or emperors, who really knew how to do that. The general public didn't. And until printing presses came along, no one really had much access to that. So you're not genetically wired to be this massive reader. Most people aren't. So it's natural that most people aren't the biggest readers at all. In fact, it makes sense that listening is probably the number one form of learning, because we were hunter-gatherers for most of our civilization, and that meant that most of this information was told through story around a campfire. So there really wasn't too much to see visually. It was just you watching someone wave their hands over a fire and talking about some information or story about where they went to hunt deer, or some myth about some gods and supernatural powers. So therefore, don't be ashamed of it. And I think the biggest objection or constraint would be resources. Well, you might say, I don't have all this money to buy all these audiobooks, or I can't afford to do X, Y, and Z. Well, you're listening to this podcast now, so you're probably pretty well off to at least get some level of audio content. And I will acknowledge that there are some restraints that you can't get through. There are certain books that are only print available, and those exist. For sure. There's a lot of books that I read because there's only print versions available of them. But this is improving, and even some old classics like Sam Walton's Made in America have now been converted to audiobook form, as well as Business Adventures by John Brooks, a business classic. That said, where do you afford all these audiobooks? Even with like a service like Audible, that still can get pricey. So, first off, if you're interested in Audible, I have a link for you if you want a free audiobook from me. Now, this won't solve the issue, but it goes in the right direction. So if you go to willyouLaugh.com/Will's Gift, and the W has to be capitalized and then the G has to be capitalized. Then that will that'll take you to a audiobook, a free audiobook of your choice that you can choose. And basically you have to sign up for audible.com. You can cancel after the first month if you want, if you don't want that recurring charge. But I do have a affiliate partnership with Audible if you want to listen to audiobooks through them. That said, I wouldn't say it solves the problem completely, because you still, Audible only gives you like two audiobooks a month with the plan, I believe. And on top of that, some of you may not be able to even afford that monthly membership. So then what do you do from there? Now, my answer is you do the best you can with the resources you can. Just make sure you have all those resources at your disposal. What I mean by that is, have you considered the library? The library is a huge go-to for most people. If you have a public library, do your research, talk to the people there, research on their website, because usually they have a lot more than you think. If you do a search for specific books, or you just look at what the platforms they have to offer. Some of them now even have a e-audio book library that you can use. It's usually through like a service like Overdrive or Hoopla, and you have this wide repository of modern and popular audiobooks, and all you have to do is download the app and then enter your library card number, and you can start downloading these audiobooks. And granted, like sometimes they're a bit dated, but sometimes you'll get some really good ones in there. Like I got some of my latest books that I just mentioned, the Bruce Lee biography that just came out 2018. I also did a interview with the author of that for my podcast, but also Guns, Germs, and Steel and Leonardo da Vinci. That all came from my public library's e-audiobook database. I wouldn't say it always fixes the issue, but it is something that's worth looking over and trying out at least. So do what you can with what you have. The podcast library is tremendous now. A lot of the content I get from here is distilled from these books from successful people, or interviews, or other content that I have taken by analyzing successful people. So in that sense, podcasts are definitely not a place where you ever run out of content. And if all else goes badly and you can't get any books because you can't afford books, or audiobooks because they're even more expensive, then at least try a podcast. There's tens of thousands of out there and millions of episodes from different people and experts. And so although you may not get some of like the golden nuggets that you can only find in a book, which I do think exist, I think you can get at least 80% of the way there. And if you're starting from scratch, that's something you can do. So I guess the final tip I have for you in terms of getting up to reading a book a week is not speed reading or any, crazy tactic like that. It's setting out a tiny chunk habit. So what I mean by that is just start with something insignificantly small that you can't help but not do, and slowly build that habit over time. So this could be as simple as 1 page a week or 1 page a day. And it's so simple that you can't help but not do it. And then stick with that for a very long time until you have completely solidified that habit, and then gradually increase that. I think the key to this is to really stick with those small amounts for a long time and not get too over eager to add on and add too many pages too quickly, because then you get burnt out and then you stop doing it before the habit has completely formed. So that's it. Once again, I have another link to the free audiobook offer at audibletrial.com/willsgift. And so that's another URL you can go to. It's audibletrial.com/willsgift, and that'll just link you to audible.com, where you'll get a free audiobook if you sign up through that link. Again, that's just my affiliate partnership with Audible. You don't have to go through that link if you don't want to. I will get a commission if you go through that link, but that's not a big deal for me. I'm just mainly trying to help you read more. So take those tips all into a nutshell, and they've really helped me, and I really think that they will help you too. Write to me, let me know your feedback, your struggles. test it out and let me know your results. I'm always looking to deliver more value and see how I can improve my content. Peace. Thank you for listening to Will's Personal Development Podcast. You can find more at willyoulaugh.com.